So you're holding this piece of tech, maybe an iPhone, probably designed out in California. But here's the thing. It's kind of surprising when you think about it. The whole complex process of making it, from the tiniest bits inside to the final device, almost all of that happens in just one country, China. This huge reliance has been absolutely key to Apple's success. And that's what we're really digging into today.
Exactly. We're going deep into this really complex, tangled relationship between Apple and China. We'll break down how this powerful connection got started, but maybe even more importantly, we're looking at the challenges, the uncertainties popping up now that might be pushing Apple and maybe the whole global tech scene towards, well, a major turning point.
Right. And guiding us through all this complexity is Patrick McGee's book, Can Apple Extricate Itself from China? It's from Scribner, and it really does a thorough job looking at how this relationship grew and, the cracks it might be showing now. This isn't just some dry business story, is it?
No, not at all. It's tied up with geopolitics, the nitty-gritty of global supply chains, and really it's about the future of how all these gadgets we use every day actually get made.
Precisely. Apple's situation is like a perfect window into these huge global shifts happening right now. So let's rewind a bit, go back to the start. It seems kind of hard to believe now, but Apple's first approach to making things, totally different.
That's right. McGee points this out back in the 70s, early days. Apple was all about keeping production close. American made. The whole idea of outsourcing, sending production overseas, that just wasn't really on the map for the computer industry back then.
But then things changed, didn't they? Late 90s.
Yeah, a pivotal shift. Apple and lots of other tech firms, too, started looking at offshoring, moving production elsewhere. And China quickly became the main place to go. A bunch of things came together to make that happen.
And a huge player in that, the book really stresses this, was Foxconn. They're this massive Taiwanese company, a contract manufacturer. So for anyone who doesn't know, they basically build stuff for other companies, like Apple. Foxconn really took the lead in training up China's workforce, which didn't have much experience with this kind of high-tech manufacturing back then.
Absolutely. And you can't talk about Foxconn without mentioning Terry Gou, the founder. McGee paints him as this incredibly sharp political player. He was apparently really good at convincing local governments in China to offer big financial incentives. We're talking serious subsidies for Foxconn.
Ah, okay. So that money helped Foxconn buy all the best equipment.
Exactly. It let them invest huge amounts in the latest machinery for their Chinese factories. And that gave them a massive edge, a real competitive advantage over anyone else thinking about making similar things somewhere else. It was really a strategic masterstroke. It locked China in as this essential part of the global tech supply chain.
Right. And Apple jumped on this early.
They were definitely one of the first big ones to really benefit. When they gave the manufacturing of the iconic iPod to Foxconn, the results were just explosive. McGee mentions iPod sales just skyrocketing from under 1 million in 2003 to, over 22 million just 2 years later by 2005. That kind of scaling up that fast, it was unheard of.
Wow. And then, of course, the iPhone hit in 2007. So that iPod success just got amplified massively. Now, the book does cover the criticisms too, right? The working conditions at Foxconn. It's important we mention the really troubling reports about worker suicides.
Yes, absolutely. It's crucial, and those criticisms are valid and serious. But McGee also tries to explain the sort of economic thinking at the time. Manufacturing costs in China were just so low. It created this incredibly strong pull for companies everywhere. For a lot of them, it just didn't make financial sense to build electronics anywhere else. The cost difference was huge.
And you can see that in Apple's investment, can't you?
Yeah.
The book says by 2015, Apple was putting something like $55 billion a year into China. And it wasn't just assembly, right? They were constantly sending engineers over.
Yeah, training local suppliers, building up this whole incredibly complicated network, component makers, logistics. It's the whole ecosystem they helped build.
So you have this symbiotic relationship, as you called it, both sides benefiting hugely, relying on each other. But now that relationship seems, under strain.
Definitely. Things have shifted. The U.S.-China trade tensions especially really threw a wrench into the works.
Right. Those threats of massive tariffs. McGee talks about a potential 145% tariff on smartphones made in China. Suddenly, that super efficient Chinese supply chain, which was Apple's big advantage, started looking like a major risk, a potential liability.
And you saw the markets react, didn't you? Pretty strongly. The book notes that even after things cooled down a bit on the trade front, Apple's stock price was still down significantly, like 13% from the start of 2025 by mid-May. That's, potentially hundreds of billions wiped off their value.
And so Apple starts looking elsewhere. The book mentions India, for example.
Yeah, there are more and more reports, and McGee covers this too, about Apple actively looking into other manufacturing spots. India comes up a lot. It definitely signals they're rethinking things long-term, strategically.
But it's not just trade tariffs causing headaches, is it? The political climate inside China seems to be changing too.
That's another big piece, yes. The situation under Xi Jinping has evolved. There are, let's say, new pressures on foreign companies like Apple operating there.
Like what kind of pressures?
Well, the book gets into how the government's become more assertive about wanting technology transfers, basically pushing foreign companies to share their tech know-how with Chinese partners as sort of the price of doing business.
Okay, I see. And then there's the push for people in China to buy Chinese brands.
Yes, a very clear push, promoting brands like Huawei. And we've even seen reports, directives telling government workers not to use iPhones. That's definitely played a part in Apple's smartphone sales dipping inside China.
Which loops us right back to the big question in McGee's book. Can Apple actually thrive if it pulls back significantly from China? It sounds like a monumental task just thinking about how deeply connected they are, that supply chain.
It's incredibly complex. The scale, the interconnectedness, it's all been built up so carefully over decades.
Yeah.
Untangling all that, it's not just moving a few assembly lines. It's way, way more complicated. The book really paints a vivid picture of how interwoven it all is.
Although one review we saw suggested that maybe the book's analysis of the direct political stuff, like Xi Jinping personally targeting Apple in the media, maybe the evidence there is a bit thinner.
Yeah, that's a fair point some reviewers made. The core argument about the supply chain challenges is very strong, but some of the more direct political claims might be, let's say, harder to pin down definitively. But regardless, that fundamental question about Apple's future in this potentially more divided global economy, that remains absolutely critical.
And it's a question with huge implications, right? Not just for Apple. It affects investors, policymakers everywhere.
Absolutely. It makes everyone think hard about where global trade is heading and what that means for all the big multinational companies.
So we've seen this incredible success story. Apple riding high, largely thanks to its deep roots in China, giving it amazing scale, efficiency. But now that very foundation feels shaky. Geopolitics, pressures within China, it's all putting it to the test.
And that lands us right back where McGee's book leaves us. Is it even realistic for Apple to significantly cut its ties with China? And if they did, or if they tried, what would the fallout be? The consequences, maybe ones we haven't even thought of yet.
It really makes you zoom out, doesn't it? Thinking about this whole complex web of global supply chains that everything seems to depend on now. What does Apple's situation really signal about the weaknesses, the interdependencies we've built into the modern economy? And what could that mean down the line, not just for tech, but for, well, pretty much every other industry, and for all of us as consumers?